The morning sun rose over New Haven just like it did every morning. The sky was pink and orange, painted with colors that reminded Daehyun of Earth, though this world was thousands of light years away from humanity's birthplace. He stood on the porch of his small house, drinking coffee and watching the neighbor's dog chase something through the grass. His wife Hana came outside and wrapped her arms around him from behind. She smelled like soap and the flower perfume she always wore. They stood together in silence, enjoying the peaceful moment before their day began. "The kids are almost ready," Hana said softly. "Yumi can't find her history project, and Taemin is convinced he needs to bring his entire rock collection to school." Daehyun laughed. "He's 6. Everything is important when you're 6. Inside the house, he could hear his children arguing about something. Yumi was 8 and thought she knew everything. Taemin followed her everywhere and copied everything she did. They fought constantly, but Daehyun knew they loved each other more than anything. New Haven was a good place to raise children. The colony had been established 15 years ago, and now 50,000 humans called it home. Most people were scientists, farmers, or teachers. There were no factories, no pollution, no crime. Children could play outside without worry. Neighbors knew each other's names. It was the kind of place people dreamed about when they left Earth. Daehyun worked at the research station on the edge of town. He studied alien plants and animals, trying to understand how life developed on different worlds. Hana worked beside him, focusing on how alien organisms could help humans make better medicines. They had met at university on Earth, fallen in love over shared microscopes and late-night lab work, and decided to build a life together among the stars. "Come on," Hana called toward the house. "We're going to be late." Yumi emerged first, carrying a poster board covered in pictures and drawings. Her school project was about the history of human space travel. She had spent 2 weeks working on it, and she was very proud of the result. Taemin followed behind her, his pockets bulging with rocks he had collected from the creek behind their house. Daehyun knelt down and looked at his son seriously. "You know, buddy, you can only bring 3 rocks to school. Pick your favorites." Taemin's face scrunched up as he considered this terrible choice. Finally, he pulled out 3 rocks and handed the others to his father. "Keep them safe, Dad." "I promise," Daehyun said, ruffling his son's hair. They piled into the family car and drove through the colony. The streets were clean and lined with trees that came from Earth. People walked on sidewalks waving at neighbors. The school was a beautiful building made of white stone, with large windows that let in plenty of light. Children played in the yard before classes started, their laughter carrying on the wind. Daehyun and Hana walked their children to the school entrance. Yumi kissed her mother's cheek quickly, already embarrassed to be seen with her parents. Taemin hugged both of them tightly. "I'll pick you up after school," Hana promised. "We'll get ice cream. Chocolate?" Taemin asked hopefully. "Whatever flavor you want." They watched their children disappear into the school building, then drove to the research station. The workday began like any other. Daehyun examined samples under his microscope while Hana reviewed data on her computer. They talked about their experiments, made jokes, and planned what to cook for dinner. They had no idea that far above their planet, in the cold darkness of space, something terrible was about to happen. In the grand chamber of the Galactic Council, thousands of light years away, representatives from 100 alien species gathered for an emergency meeting. The chamber was enormous, with floating platforms for each species. Holographic displays showed star maps and data charts. Translation devices allowed everyone to understand each other, though the conversations were often heated and difficult. Counselor Vextar stood on his platform, his forearms gesturing dramatically as he spoke. He was Krillian, a species that looked like massive insects with gray exoskeletons and too many eyes. The Krillian Empire had controlled large parts of the galaxy for thousands of years, but recently, they had been losing territory and influence. "The humans are expanding too quickly," Vextar argued, his voice echoing through the chamber. "They arrived in our galaxy only 200 years ago, and already they claim dozens of worlds. They build colonies faster than we can track them. They trade with species who should be our allies. If we do not act now, they will overwhelm us all." Some counselors nodded in agreement. Others remained silent, watching carefully. A few spoke out against Vextar's words. "The humans have broken no laws," said Counselor Rix, a being made of living crystal who shimmered with different colors as she spoke. "They are peaceful. They trade fairly. They have shown us new technologies and asked for nothing in return except friendship. That is exactly the problem, Vextar hissed. They make friends easily. They charm everyone they meet. But behind those smiles, they are taking everything we have built. We must show them that this galaxy has rules. We must show them that there are consequences for expansion. What do you propose? Asked another counselor. Vextar's mandibles clicked together in what might have been a smile. A warning strike. One of their small colonies. Nothing that will truly hurt them, but enough to make them understand they must negotiate with us. They will see our strength and agree to limit their expansion. It is a simple solution. Several counselors shifted uncomfortably on their platforms. An old counselor from a species that had existed for millions of years spoke up. Her voice barely a whisper that somehow filled the entire chamber. There is a rule, she said slowly, an unwritten law that every wise species learns. You do not harm their young. The humans are gentle, yes. They are kind, yes. But if you hurt their children, you will learn why they survived long enough to reach the stars. They are not like us. They do not forgive. They do not forget. Vextar laughed, a harsh sound that made several counselors flinch. Superstition. Old fears. The humans are no different from any other species. They will negotiate when faced with superior force. I move that we authorize a limited strike against one human colony as a warning. The vote was close, but Vextar had worked for months to build support for his plan. When the count was finished, the authorization had passed. The Krillian Empire was given permission to conduct a warning strike against a human colony. Vextar selected New Haven for the attack. It was small, isolated, and far from the major human worlds. The perfect target to send a message without causing too much damage. He ordered his fleet to prepare for immediate departure. As the council session ended and the representatives returned to their ships, the old counselor who had spoken the warning remained in her chamber. She knew what was coming. She had seen it before, millions of years ago, when another species had made the same mistake with a different civilization. They will learn, she whispered to the empty air. They always learn. But the lesson will be written in blood and fire, and the galaxy will never be the same. On New Haven, Daehyun and Hana worked through their day, unaware of the decision made light years away. They had no idea that their peaceful life was about to end. They did not know that their children, playing and learning in their school, had only hours left to live. The galaxy was about to learn the first law, though it would be written in tragedy instead of wisdom. The Krillian warships dropped out of hyperspace above New Haven without warning. There were 12 of them, massive vessels that blocked out the sun as they moved into position over the colony. Their weapons were already charging, energy building in cannons that could turn cities into dust. In the colony's small defense center, alarms screamed to life. Captain Jiwoo had been drinking coffee and reading reports when every screen in the room turned red. She dropped her cup and ran to the main console, her hands already reaching for the emergency protocols. Unknown ships in orbit, her officer reported, his voice shaking. They're not responding to hails. They're powering weapons. Jiwoo felt ice flood through her veins. New Haven had 6 defense satellites and a handful of patrol ships. They were meant to stop pirates and asteroids, not a full military fleet. She had trained for this scenario, but she had never believed it would actually happen. Send out the evacuation signal, she ordered. Get everyone to the shelters. Contact Earth Command and tell them we're under attack. The sirens began wailing across the colony. People stopped what they were doing and looked up at the sky, confused and frightened. Most of them had never heard the evacuation alarm before. They did not understand what it meant until they saw the massive alien ships hanging in the sky above them. At the research station, Daehyun heard the sirens and felt his heart stop. Hana grabbed his arm, her eyes wide with fear. They both knew what the alarm meant, and their first thought was the same. The children, Hana whispered. They ran for their car, along with dozens of other workers who had the same idea. Everyone was trying to get to the school, to reach their children before whatever was coming arrived. The streets were chaos. Cars crashed into each other. People ran on foot. Parents screamed their children's names. Daehyun drove as fast as he could, his hands gripping the steering wheel so hard they hurt. Beside him, Hana was trying to call the school on her phone, but the network was overloaded. Everyone was trying to call someone. The phone just beeped uselessly. It's going to be okay, Daehyun said, though he did not believe it. We'll get them. We'll get them and go to the shelters. Above them, the Krillian ships finished charging their weapons. Vextar had given specific orders. The attack was meant to be quick and devastating. Destroy enough to show strength, but not so much that it would provoke total war. The Krillians believed humans would respond like any rational species. They would negotiate. They would compromise. They would accept that the galaxy had rules. The Krillians did not understand humans at all. The first weapon fired. A beam of pure energy struck the ground in the center of the colony, where the government building stood. The building simply disappeared, turned into vapor in an instant. The shockwave that followed knocked down everything within half a mile. Windows shattered. Walls collapsed. The ground itself cracked and heaved. More beams followed. The defense center vanished. Captain Jiwoo and everyone inside died without even knowing what hit them. The hospital disappeared next, taking patients and doctors with it. The spaceport, the power station, the water treatment plant. One by one, the colony's vital structures were erased from existence. Daehyun saw the flash of light ahead and slammed on the brakes. The shockwave hit his car a second later, flipping it over. He felt himself tumbling, heard Hana screaming, felt pain as something hit his head. Then everything went dark for a moment. When he opened his eyes, he was hanging upside down in his seatbelt. Blood dripped from a cut on his forehead. Beside him, Hana was moving, also bleeding but alive. The car had landed on its roof. Through the cracked windshield, he could see fire and smoke everywhere. "We have to go," Hana said, her voice strangely calm. "We have to get to the school." They cut themselves free from their seatbelts and crawled out of the wrecked car. Other people were doing the same, emerging from damaged vehicles and collapsed buildings. Everyone was covered in dust and blood. Everyone was looking up at the sky where the alien ships continued their attack. Another beam struck nearby, and the heat was so intense that Daehyun felt his skin burn from hundreds of feet away. He grabbed Hana's hand and they ran toward the school, climbing over rubble and dodging falling debris. Around them, people were screaming, crying, calling for help. Bodies lay in the street, some moving, some still. The bombing continued for 10 minutes, though it felt like hours. The Krillian ships fired methodically, destroying every major building in the colony. When they were finished, they sent one final message to the ruins below. "This is a warning from the Galactic Council. Humanity's expansion must stop. Withdraw from the contested sectors within 30 days or face further consequences." This attack was authorized by the Council as a demonstration of resolve. "You have been warned." Then the ships jumped back into hyperspace and disappeared, leaving behind a colony that no longer existed. Daehyun and Hana reached the school 20 minutes after the attack ended. The building was gone. Where the white stone structure had stood, where their children had gone to learn and play, there was only a crater and piles of broken concrete. Smoke rose from the ruins. Small fires burned here and there. Other parents were already there, digging through the rubble with their bare hands. They were calling names, begging for answers, refusing to believe what they were seeing. Hana made a sound that was not quite human, a wail of pure grief and denial, and started pulling at chunks of concrete. Daehyun joined her, his hands bleeding as he moved rocks and metal. They dug for an hour, then 2. Other survivors came to help. They formed lines, passing debris away, searching for any sign of life. They found some children in a basement that had partially survived. 5 kids, terrified and hurt but alive. Parents rushed forward to claim them, sobbing with relief. But there were 500 children in the school when the attack began. Daehyun and Hana kept digging. They found Yumi in what had been the 3rd-floor classroom. She was lying under a collapsed wall, her history project still clutched in her hands. Her eyes were closed. She looked like she was sleeping, except for the dust and blood. Hana fell to her knees beside her daughter and screamed, a sound of such pure agony that everyone nearby stopped what they were doing. Daehyun held his wife as she cradled Yumi's body, and he felt something break inside his chest. The pain was physical, like someone had reached into him and torn out his heart. He could not breathe, could not think, could only feel the weight of his daughter in his arms as he took her from Hana. They found Taemin an hour later, not far from his sister. The 6-year-old boy was holding his 3 favorite rocks, the ones he had brought to school that morning. His little face was peaceful. He had probably died instantly without fear or pain. That thought did not help at all. Daehyun and Hana sat in the ruins with their children's bodies until other survivors gently took them away. Around them, hundreds of other parents were doing the same thing. The sounds of grief filled the air, a chorus of loss that would echo in the survivors' minds forever. By nightfall, they had counted the dead. 4,200 colonists had been killed in the attack. 1,100 of them were children. The number felt too big to understand. How could 1,100 children just stop existing in 10 minutes? How could the universe allow such a thing? The survivors gathered in what had been the park. It was one of the few open spaces not completely destroyed. They built fires for light and warmth. Medical supplies were limited, but people shared what they had. No one knew what to do. No one knew what came next. Dae-hyun sat with his back against a tree. Hana pressed against his side. Neither of them spoke. What words could possibly matter now? Their children were gone. Their life was gone. Everything they had built and dreamed about had been erased in minutes by aliens they had never met, for reasons they did not understand. Around them, other parents sat in similar silence. Some cried. Some stared at nothing. Some held the belongings of their children, small treasures that were all they had left. A man stood up slowly and looked at the others. He was a teacher from the school, one who had been in the bathroom when the building was hit. He had survived by pure chance while his students died. They killed our children, he said quietly. The council authorized this. They said it was a warning. They said we should negotiate. He started laughing, but there was no humor in the sound. It was the laugh of someone whose mind could not quite process what had happened. They think we'll negotiate, he said. They think we'll be reasonable. They don't know us at all. Hana raised her head and Dae-hyun saw something in her eyes that frightened him. It was cold and hard, like ice that would never melt. When she spoke, her voice was steady and calm. They're going to learn, she said. They're going to learn what happens when you hurt our babies. No one disagreed. In that moment, in that ruined park surrounded by the graves of their children, something changed in every survivor. The gentleness that had made humans good neighbors in the galaxy burned away, leaving something older and more terrible behind. The news reached Earth 3 days after the attack. The message traveled through relay stations, jumping from system to system, carrying images and data that no one wanted to see. When it arrived at Earth Command headquarters, the officers who received it stood in silence for a long time, staring at the screens. The images showed the ruins of New Haven. Burned buildings, crater-filled streets, and rows upon rows of small bodies covered in white sheets, waiting to be buried because there was nowhere left to bury them properly. 1,100 children. The number appeared again and again in the reports, as if repeating it might somehow make it less real. Admiral Hyun was in a meeting when his assistant interrupted him. The young woman's face was pale and her hands shook as she handed him a datapad. The admiral looked at the screen and his expression did not change. He simply stood up, excused himself from the meeting, and walked to his private office. He locked the door, sat at his desk, and opened the secure safe hidden in the wall. Inside was a black envelope that had been placed there 30 years ago when he first took command. Every admiral received the same envelope. It had been prepared by the founders of Earth's space fleet, military leaders who understood human history better than most. The envelope was labeled simply, "In the event of genocide against human civilians." Admiral Hyun opened it and read the orders inside. They were short and clear. There were no questions to ask, no confirmations needed. The orders had been approved decades ago by every government on Earth. They existed for exactly this scenario, a nightmare that everyone hoped would never come. He read them twice, then placed them back in the envelope. His hands were steady. His breathing was calm. Inside, he felt nothing at all, as if some switch in his mind had been flipped, turning off everything except cold logic and purpose. He made 3 phone calls. The first was to the Joint Chiefs of Staff on Earth. The second was to the President of the United Earth Alliance. The third was to the commanders of every human fleet in space. Each conversation was brief. Each person he spoke to understood immediately what was happening. "Execute Protocol Black," he said in each call. That was all. 2 words that would change the galaxy forever. Across human space, military bases received the activation codes. Protocols that had been practiced but never used suddenly became real. Every ship in the human fleet received orders to report to assembly points. Every reserve soldier was activated. Every military factory went to full production. But humanity did not make any announcements. There were no press conferences, no angry speeches, no demands sent to the Galactic Council. The silence was complete and terrifying. On the council station, Councillor Vexidtar waited for humanity's response. He expected angry messages, maybe threats, probably requests for negotiations. He had already prepared his replies, carefully worded statements about the need for order in the galaxy and the importance of respecting established powers. 3 days passed. Then a week, then 2 weeks. Nothing came from the humans. No messages, no communications, no diplomatic protests. The human ambassador to the council simply stopped attending sessions. His office was empty, his staff gone. It was as if humanity had decided to ignore the council entirely. Vextar found this puzzling but not concerning. Perhaps the humans were too shocked to respond properly. Perhaps they were arguing among themselves about how to proceed. Either way, their silence meant they were weak. The plan had worked. Other counselors were not so confident. Counselor Rix, the crystal being who had spoken against the attack, tried repeatedly to contact human officials. Her messages went unanswered. She sent probes to human space to observe their activities, but the probes were turned back at the borders without explanation. Something is wrong, she told other counselors who would listen. The humans are too quiet. This is not the silence of defeat. This is the silence of something preparing. Most ignored her warnings. The Krillian Empire celebrated their successful operation. Vextar was promoted to High Counselor, given more power and authority. The council began discussing how to divide up the sectors that humans would presumably abandon in response to the warning. They did not notice when human merchant ships stopped trading with all council species. They did not pay attention when human diplomats quietly closed their embassies and returned home. They did not understand the significance when human research stations were evacuated and dismantled. On New Haven, the survivors buried their dead. They dug graves in the hills outside the colony, in ground that had not been touched by the bombs. 1,100 small graves, each marked with a stone that bore a name and a date. Parents stood beside these graves and made promises in whispered voices. Dae-hyun stood between 2 graves, looking at the names carved into the stone. Yumi, Taemin, 8 years old and 6 years old. They should have grown up, should have gone to university, should have fallen in love and had children of their own. Now they were just names on rocks. Hana stood beside him, holding a flower that had somehow survived the bombing. She placed it on Yumi's grave, then Taemin's. Her face was dry. She had not cried since the day of the attack. Something in her had frozen solid, turning her grief into something else entirely. I joined the military, she said quietly. Intelligence Division. They need people who understand alien biology. Dae-hyun nodded. He had expected this. I enlisted yesterday. Marines. They looked at each other, these 2 scientists who had spent their lives studying how to save lives, now preparing to take them. Neither felt any shame or doubt. Their children were dead. Someone would pay for that. It was simple logic, as natural as gravity. They're going to train me to make weapons, Hana continued. Biological weapons specifically designed for Krillian physiology. They asked if I was comfortable with that work. What did you say? I asked when I could start. Across New Haven, similar conversations were happening. Teachers becoming soldiers, farmers learning to pilot warships, doctors studying how to kill instead of heal. The colony that had been a peaceful research outpost was transforming into something else. Ships arrived from Earth, bringing supplies and support. But they also brought recruiters. Every survivor who was able was given the opportunity to join the military. Most accepted. They had nothing left to stay for. Their homes were destroyed. Their families were dead. All that remained was the need to make sure this never happened again. A month after the attack, Admiral Hyon's fleet began to assemble. Over 2,000 warships gathered in secret, in systems far from any council observation. The fleet was massive, larger than anything humanity had ever put together. But even more impressive were the ships themselves. For 200 years, humanity had been in the galaxy. For 200 years, they had shown the Council their civilian technology, their peaceful innovations, their helpful inventions. But they had been very careful about what military technology they revealed. The human ships the Council had seen were old designs, kept deliberately limited. The ships gathering in Admiral Hyun's fleet were different. They carried weapons systems that were decades ahead of anything the Council knew humans possessed. Experimental drives that made them faster, shields that could absorb damage that would destroy other vessels, and the biological weapons that Hana and thousands of other scientists had spent the month perfecting. The Admiral stood on the bridge of his flagship, looking at the fleet display. Each dot represented a ship. Each ship carried thousands of humans who had volunteered for this mission. Many of them were from New Haven, survivors who had buried their children and sworn oaths of vengeance. Others were from across human space, people who had seen the images and felt their own grief turn to rage. "Sir," his communications officer said quietly, "we've received confirmation from all fleet elements. Every ship is ready. Every crew is prepared. We're just waiting for your order." Admiral Hyun thought about the children of New Haven. He thought about Counselor Vextar and the smug certainty that humans would negotiate. He thought about the Galactic Council voting to authorize the death of innocents as a warning. "Send a message to the Council," he said. "Make sure every species receives it." The communications officer nodded and began recording. Admiral Hyun spoke slowly and clearly, his voice carrying no emotion at all. "This is Admiral Hyun of the United Earth Fleet. 1 month ago, the Galactic Council authorized an attack on a human civilian colony. This attack killed 4,200 of our people. 1,100 of them were children. The Council called this a warning and demanded we negotiate. We will not negotiate. We will not compromise. We will not forgive. You broke the first law of the galaxy. You harmed our children. There is only one response to that. This message is the only warning you will receive. Protect your own children. You have 48 hours. The message was sent simultaneously to every council member, every major news network, every government in the galaxy. Within hours, it had been broadcast everywhere. The silence that humanity had maintained for a month was finally broken, and the galaxy trembled at what the silence had hidden. On the council station, Counselor Vexitar watched the message with growing confusion that slowly turned to fear. Other counselors began demanding explanations. What did the humans mean? What were they planning? Was this just an empty threat? The 48 hours ended exactly on schedule. Admiral Hyun did not give a speech to his fleet. There was nothing left to say. Every person on every ship knew why they were here. Every one of them had seen the images from New Haven. Many of them had lost someone they loved in the attack. The fleet jumped to hyperspace in perfect synchronization, 2,000 warships moving as one. Their destination was not a military target. It was not a strategic installation. It was a Krillian colony world called Velthar, home to 80,000 Krillians, including many of the families of Krillian government officials and military leaders. Admiral Hyun had chosen this target carefully. It was not the closest Krillian world to human space. It was not the most heavily defended, but it was important to the people who had ordered the attack on New Haven. It was where their children lived and played and went to school. The Krillian defense fleet detected the human ships as they emerged from hyperspace. There were 40 Krillian warships guarding the system, modern vessels with experienced crews. The Krillian admiral in command felt confident. 40 ships against 2,000 seemed like bad odds, but the Krillians had superior technology. Everyone knew that. Their ships were faster, their weapons stronger, their shields more advanced. He sent a message demanding the human fleet turn back. Then he ordered his ships to intercept formation and prepared to show these upstart humans what real military power looked like. On the bridge of his flagship, Admiral Hyun watched the Krillian fleet approaching. Beside him, Hana stood at a console, her fingers moving over controls. She was not military crew, but she had been given special clearance for this operation. Her work over the past month was about to be tested. Range to enemy fleet? Admiral Hyun asked. 2 million kilometers in closing, his tactical officer replied. Launch weapon package 1. The human ships fired, but not with energy weapons or missiles. They launched what looked like simple canisters, thousands of them, spreading through space in a cloud between the two fleets. The Krillian admiral saw them and laughed. Were the humans shooting garbage at them? This was their secret weapon? The canisters reached the Krillian fleet and exploded, but not with fire or force. They released a substance into space, a carefully engineered biological agent that Hana and her team had created. It was invisible, odorless, and completely harmless to every species in the galaxy except one. The Krillian ships had life support systems that recycled air and maintained comfortable environments for the crews. These systems automatically filtered out dangerous substances, but the filters could not stop something they had never been designed to detect. The biological agent passed through every filter like it was not even there, and entered the air supply of every Krillian ship. On the bridge of the Krillian flagship, the Admiral felt his lungs begin to burn. Around him, his crew started gasping, clawing at their throats. The agent attacked Krillian respiratory systems with brutal efficiency, turning their complex breathing structures against them. It did not kill instantly. It took almost 5 minutes. 5 minutes of agony as they slowly suffocated despite breathing normally. Every Krillian in the defense fleet died in those 5 minutes. 40 ships, thousands of trained soldiers gone without firing a single shot. The vessels drifted in space, their systems still functioning, their engines still running, but their crews simply gone. Admiral Hyon watched this happen without expression. Beside him, Hana stared at the empty Krillian ships and felt nothing at all. These aliens had killed her children. Now some of their people were dead. It seemed fair. Status of the planet? The Admiral asked. Detecting massive panic on the surface. They're evacuating cities. Approximately 40,000 Krillians are heading for the underground shelters. Open a channel to the planet. The communications officer nodded. Every screen on Velthar suddenly showed Admiral Hyon's face. He looked tired, like a man who had not slept in days, but his eyes were clear and hard. People of Velthar, he said, 1 month ago your government attacked one of our colonies. They killed 4,000 of our people. 1,100 of those killed were children between the ages of 4 and 12. They were in school when they died. Your council called this a warning. They said it was authorized and necessary. Today, you will receive a warning of your own. You have 2 hours to evacuate every child from your cities. Every person under 18 years of age must be moved to your underground shelters. Any adults who wish to protect them may go as well. 2 hours. Then we will fire on your cities. The transmission ended. On Velthar, chaos erupted. The Krillians did not believe the humans would really do it. Surely this was a bluff. Surely they would not actually attack civilians. That would be barbaric. But as the minutes ticked by and the human fleet remained in orbit, weapons charging, doubt began to set in. Parents grabbed their children and ran for the shelters. Schools were evacuated in panic. The underground bunkers that had been built decades ago and never used suddenly, filled with terrified young Krillians and the adults, trying to protect them. Some Krillian officials sent messages to the human fleet, trying to negotiate, offering to discuss terms. The messages were ignored. The countdown continued. 2 hours after the warning, the underground shelters were packed with every child on the planet and roughly half the adult population. The rest remained in the cities, either unable to reach shelter in time or refusing to believe the humans would actually attack. Admiral Hyon received confirmation that the shelters were sealed. He checked the structural data his ships had gathered. The shelters were deep underground, reinforced, designed to survive anything short of a direct nuclear strike. The children would be safe. Target all government buildings, military facilities, and command centers, he ordered. Leave residential areas unless they house military personnel. Fire when ready. The human fleet opened fire. Unlike the Krillian attack on New Haven, which had been random and total destruction, the human bombardment was surgical and precise. Energy beams struck specific buildings, destroying them completely while leaving nearby structures intact. The planetary government center vanished. The military headquarters. The council chambers where Krillian leaders had voted to support the attack on New Haven. The bombardment lasted 30 minutes. When it ended, every seat of Krillian power on Velthar was gone. Roughly 20,000 Krillian adults were dead. Not one child was harmed. The shelters remained untouched. Admiral Hyon sent one final message to the planet. Your children are safe. We are not monsters. But understand this. Every adult who died today died because your leaders chose to kill our children. This is justice. This is what happens when you break the first law. Tell your government. Tell the council. Tell every species in the galaxy. We will not negotiate. We will not stop. Every world that participated in or supported the attack on New Haven will receive the same judgment. Protect your children. We will protect ours. The human fleet jumped away, leaving the Krillian survivors to emerge from their shelters and see what had been done. The children came out expecting to return to their homes and schools. Instead, they found rubble and ash. They found their parents crying. They found their world changed forever. But they were alive. The humans had kept their promise. Not one child had been harmed. The news spread across the galaxy faster than light. The council convened an emergency session. Every member present, every screen showing images of the attack on Velthar. Counselor Vexitar stood before them, trying to maintain his composure even as his legs shook with fear. "This is barbaric," he said. "The humans attacked a civilian world. They killed 20,000 innocent people. They must be stopped. They must be—" "You killed 1,100 children." Counselor Rix interrupted, her voice cutting through his words like crystal through flesh. "You bombed a school. You destroyed a hospital. You targeted civilians deliberately as a warning. The humans gave you 2 hours to protect your young. They killed only adults. They showed more mercy than you did. But the loss of life is your responsibility," another counselor said. "You pushed for this attack. You convinced us it would work. You assured us the humans would negotiate. You were wrong about everything." Around the chamber, other counselors were receiving messages from their home worlds. The humans had sent detailed data about the biological weapon used against the Krillian fleet. Every species was analyzing it, trying to understand how it worked. What they found terrified them. The weapon was incredibly sophisticated, targeted at the genetic level to affect only Krillians. But the delivery method, the engineering, the precision of the attack showed capabilities that humanity had never revealed before. If humans could make a weapon like this in 1 month, what else could they do? What other surprises were they hiding? More worrying were the reports from intelligence services. Human ships were moving throughout the galaxy, but not in attack formations. They were gathering information, mapping Krillian systems, identifying targets. It became clear that Velthar was just the beginning. The humans had a list and they were working through it methodically. On Earth, Prime Minister Soman addressed the human population for the first time since the attack. She stood before cameras in a simple black dress, her face showing the weight of grief that every human felt. Behind. The human fleet struck 3 more Krillian worlds in the next 2 weeks. Each attack followed the same pattern. The human ships arrived, destroyed any military vessels in orbit, then gave the warning. 2 hours to evacuate the children. 2 hours to get them to safety. Then the bombardment began, precise and devastating, targeting only government and military facilities. Every time the Krillians moved their children to safety. Every time the adults who remained behind died. Every time the humans proved they meant exactly what they said. They would not harm children, but they would kill every adult who had supported the attack on New Haven. The Krillian Empire began to collapse. Their military could not stop the human attacks. Their weapons were useless against the biological agents that killed their crews before battles even began. Their shields meant nothing against the precise bombardment that followed. Worse, their people were losing faith in their government. Why had their leaders attacked the humans? Why had they believed it would work? Why had they killed children and expected no consequences? These questions were asked in every home, every workplace, every public space throughout the Krillian Empire. The answers were not good. Economic collapse followed military defeat. Trade stopped. Food shipments were disrupted. Planets that had relied on the central government for supplies found themselves isolated and struggling. The empire that had existed for thousands of years was falling apart in weeks. On Velthar, the children who had survived the first attack grew up quickly. They watched their world try to rebuild. They saw their parents struggling with grief and anger and shame. They heard the stories about New Haven and began to understand what their government had done. Some of them felt guilt for actions they had not taken. Others felt rage at the humans who had destroyed their world. Most just felt confused and scared. A young Krillian girl named Lexara, who had been in the shelters during the attack, asked her mother a question that many children were asking. Why did we attack their children first? Her mother had no good answer. No one did. The official justification about showing strength and demanding negotiations seemed hollow now. How could you negotiate after murdering children? What had they expected would happen? On the Galactic Council station, Counselor Vexitar was no longer attending sessions. He had gone into hiding, moving from place to place, surrounded by guards who were increasingly unreliable. His own people were hunting him. Not just humans, but Krillians who blamed him for the disaster he had created. The council itself was in chaos. Some species wanted to intervene and stop the human attacks. Others refused to get involved, saying the Krillians had brought this on themselves. A few, like Councillor Rix, were trying to find a way to make peace before the situation got worse. The humans will listen to reason, one councillor argued. We just need to find the right approach. Offer them reparations. Give them territory. Punish those responsible. Councillor Rix made a sound like crystal breaking. You still do not understand. This is not about territory or money. This is about their children. You cannot pay for dead children. You cannot negotiate away that kind of grief. The humans will stop when they decide justice has been served and not one moment before. Then what do you suggest we do? Protect your young. Hope the humans remember mercy and never, ever make this mistake again. Agent Mireille worked in the shadows of the galactic intelligence community, feeding information to species that were trying to stay neutral. She had been a spy before the attack on New Haven, gathering information about potential threats to humanity. Now her job was different. Now she was making sure everyone understood exactly what humanity was capable of. She leaked classified files showing human military developments from the past 50 years, weapon systems that had never been revealed, ship designs that were decades ahead of anything the Council knew about, biological research that made the weapon used at Velthar look simple by comparison. The message was clear. Humanity had been hiding its true capabilities for 2 centuries. The peaceful traders and friendly explorers had always been capable of terrible violence. They had simply chosen not to use it. Until their children were murdered. The effect was exactly what Mireille intended. Species throughout the galaxy began re-evaluating their relationships with humanity. Treaties were quietly reinforced. Defensive pacts were carefully reviewed. No one wanted to accidentally provoke the humans into expanding their campaign beyond the Krillians. Dae-hyun deployed with his marine unit to a Krillian military base on the edge of their territory. The base was already abandoned by the time the humans arrived, but there were still computer systems and records to secure. His unit spent 3 days going through files documenting everything they found. What they discovered was damning. The attack on New Haven had been planned for 6 months. The Krillian military had detailed maps of the colony, knew exactly where the schools and hospitals were located, and had deliberately targeted them. The order to fire on civilian structures had come directly from the top of the Krillian command. Among the files was a communication from Councillor Vextar approving the target list. His message was short and brutal. Maximum casualties ensure maximum effect. Strike the soft targets first. Dae-hyun read this message several times, his hands shaking with rage. Soft targets. They had called his children soft targets. They had planned to kill them, had carefully calculated how many deaths would be needed to scare humanity into submission. He copied the file and sent it up the chain of command. Within hours, it was broadcast across the galaxy. Every species saw the proof that the attack on New Haven had been deliberate, calculated, and approved at the highest levels. Any sympathy that might have existed for the Krillians evaporated. The human military was not just made up of people like Dae-hyun, survivors seeking justice. Regular soldiers, people who had not lost family at New Haven, volunteered in massive numbers. They understood what this war was about. It was about making sure no human child ever died like those children had died. It was about teaching the galaxy a lesson that would never be forgotten. Commander June led a fighter squadron that struck Krillian supply lines, cutting off resources to their remaining military forces. He had a wife and 2 children safe on Earth, and he flew every mission thinking about them. If he did not stop the Krillians here, if humanity showed weakness now, his children might be targeted next. That thought made him fearless. His squadron destroyed 3 Krillian supply convoys in 1 week, crippling their ability to feed their remaining fleets. When asked by a reporter how he felt about the Krillian losses, he said simply, "They should have thought about consequences before they killed children." Back on Earth, Hana continued her work developing weapons. But she also spent time analyzing Krillian biology for another purpose. The Krillians were suffering under the weight of the war. Their people were starving in some regions. Children were going hungry. Hana developed a nutritional supplement that was compatible with Krillian biology, cheap to produce, and could keep children fed even when other food was scarce. She made sure the formula was shared freely with Krillian medical services. The adults could suffer for what their government had done. The children were innocent. This act of mercy confused many people. Why help the enemy's children? Hana's answer was always the same. Because they are children. Because we fight to protect children, not to become the monsters who kill them. We are showing the galaxy what should have been done all along. 6 months after the attack on New Haven, the Krillian Empire officially fractured into 17 separate governments. Some tried to negotiate with humanity. Others simply collapsed into chaos. A few attempted to continue fighting, but without resources or unified command, they were quickly defeated. Admiral Hyon began receiving surrender offers from individual Krillian systems. The offers were generous, desperate, offering anything and everything in exchange for the humans stopping their attacks. The Admiral reviewed each offer carefully and accepted most of them, but only under specific conditions. Every system that surrendered had to hand over anyone who had participated in planning or executing the attack on New Haven. They had to provide full documentation of the attack. They had to acknowledge, publicly and formally, that what was done was genocide against children and could never be justified. And they had to agree to the New Haven Accords, a new set of laws that would be written into galactic governance. Most systems agreed immediately. The few that refused were added to the target list. The humans also made it clear that they were not occupying Krillian territory or taking their resources. This was not a war of conquest. It was a war of justice. Once justice was served, once every person responsible was held accountable, once the galaxy understood the lesson, the war would end. This confused many species who were used to wars of expansion and resource acquisition. The humans were spending enormous resources on this campaign and taking nothing in return except justice. It seemed inefficient, irrational even, but humanity had never cared about efficiency when it came to their children. Counselor Vextar was finally located on a remote station at the edge of Krillian space. He had been hiding there for 3 months, protected by a small group of loyalists who still believed in his vision of a galaxy ray.